Hey, well, hello everyone. Welcome to BookBeat, and we're continuing today with our Spenser series. Today is number 10 called The Widening Gyre. Difficult word, not a word we often hear, but a very interesting word considering Spenser's relationship with, I think, Susan Silverman. So, yeah, there's the spelling Gyre. It means a widening circle. Um, well, let's talk about the book. So, here we go. Who do we have in this story? Uh, well, we've got some of our regulars. Hawk is here. Paul Giacomin is here. Susan is here. Spenser is here, of course. Quirk and Belson, they're also here. These are, the usual suspects, the usual characters. One of the reasons we love to continue to read all of the Spenser books. And some other main characters this time. We have a politician, a Christian fundamentalist, very conservative Christian called Meade Alexander, and his wife, Ronnie. She's an important part of the story. His opponent in the upcoming election, Robert Brown, who apparently is known to be controlled by the mob, a guy named Joe Bros there in Boston. And in the story, we also have Joe's son, Jerry Bros. And we finally get to meet Vinnie Morris. Vinnie Morris. Last time we met Tony Marcus. This time we meet Vinnie Morris, who is basically works with various gangsters. He's a gunman, but seems to be a good guy. We meet him a lot in future books, and he often works with Spenser and is someone that Spenser trusts, and Hawk as well. So these are the main guys in the story this time. And this story takes place, in Boston, especially at the beginning, middle, and end. But we do also spend some time in Washington, D.C. and the Georgetown area, which is a nice little change. The reason is that Susan Silverman is in Washington, D.C., working on her PhD. She actually is working on it at Harvard University, but is in Washington to do an internship. Okay, so the story. Why has Spenser been hired this time? Well, this politician, Meade Alexander, hires Spenser basically to protect him during the Senate election campaign against an opponent with mob ties. So there have been some threats. There's some danger. He doesn't really have that good of a team guarding him at the moment. And so he hires Spenser, who he has been told is the best of the best. But that's not actually what this story is about. What this story is about is after Spenser has worked for Meade Alexander for, I don't know, maybe a few weeks or so, he wants to talk with Spenser alone, and he tells Spenser that he is being blackmailed. Apparently, someone has a video of his wife, a sex video with his wife and a young man. And Meade Alexander doesn't know what to do. He loves his wife very much, and he doesn't want her to know that he knows about it. And so he begs Spenser to find out who's doing it and see if he can help him so that he doesn't have to drop out of the race and so that his wife never knows. So Spenser really has his work cut out for him on this one. Okay, so some of the main action scenes or main other types of scenes here. Yeah, we've got a few different times where some thugs come and threaten Spenser. They threaten some campaign workers. Spenser protects them. That's a nice scene, a very nice scene. Spenser, of course, kicks their ass. Spenser's discussion with Vinnie Morris is very interesting because Vinnie's not afraid of Spenser, and Spenser knows that Vinnie Morris is someone to be feared. So he's careful. He's careful in how he talks to him. And then Spenser also goes and talks with Joe Brose, who's older than Vinnie and doesn't basically give a shit with what Spenser thinks about anything. But Spenser forces him to listen to him because Spenser has something to tell him that Joe Brose's son Jerry is up to no good, and Joe Brose is really surprised at what he hears because he has no idea what's going on. And so that's a really nice scene. There's a scene where Spenser talks with the other politician, Robert Brown, who basically thinks he can push Spenser around until he finds out he can't. And there are a few scenes where Brose decides to kill Spenser instead of caving into Spenser's wishes regarding Meade Alexander. And then there's, but he fails. And then so Spenser tries one more time to have a talk with Brose and try to solve this thing. And so Vinnie is there, Hawk is there, but it's mainly Spenser and Brose, and it is a very, very interesting conversation too. Finally, this isn't what we would actually call action, but Spenser's very deep conversations with Paul about Spenser's life and how Spenser has been acting because of Susan, and also Spenser's conversations with Susan. These are really, really deep. They're kind of extremely important for the flow of the entire series. And they're heartbreaking because Spenser is in deep pain. So, surprises here. Yeah. Spenser likes drinking, but boy, it's really getting out of hand. He's drinking all day long. He's not drinking beer anymore. He's drinking Irish whiskey. He's dull. He's listless. He's without focus. And he is in very real danger of, making a serious mistake, of getting himself killed. And there's no one who knows this better than Hawk. And Hawk is very, very worried about him. Spenser just can't deal with the fact that Susan has decided to go to Washington, and she's there for, maybe a year or two. It's not very clear, but Spenser is all suddenly alone, and he knows that basically, he feels strongly that he and Susan are drifting further and further apart, but he loves her deeply, doesn't want that to happen, but is trying to do his best to understand what she is feeling. So I think this is Robert B. Parker at his best. The pain. I can feel that pain deeply. And we're trying to understand Susan's side, like Spenser is trying to understand her. But at the same time, I don't know, maybe, we we hate her guts for what she is putting Spenser through. It's really kind of heavy and depressing, but because it is so heavy and depressing, and because Robert B. Parker is, it's his decision. He wants us to feel this way. He wants us to be involved with what Spenser and Susan are going through. And later on in the series, they overcome all these difficulties. And, it's like you can appreciate the good that you have when you go through troubled times. We as readers, I think, are experiencing the same kind of thing as Spenser is and Susan is. And so I think Robert B. Parker is just brilliant in how he has handled all of this. So, repeats. Well, we've got, like I said, I've come into the series in the middle of it all. And so Vinnie Morris, it's great to meet him for the first time. He will be with us quite a few times in the future. So there's Vinnie Morris. Hawk is Spenser's rock, and we are like all the way there now. Hawk, Robert B. Parker has finally figured out who Hawk is, how to portray him, how Hawk speaks, how Hawk thinks. It's all there now, and this is the Hawk that will be with us for the rest of the series. And we also have Quirk and Belsom. They're here again. Belson, and they're there, and how they feel about Spenser is always mixed. Like half of them is, this guy's a real pain in the ass, but they also know he's good at heart, and they also like Susan. Maybe love Susan. Everyone loves Susan, and they know the pain that he's going through. So this has come up in previous books as well. So let's take a look at some quotes, some of my favorite quotes, favorite lines from this story. I sipped a little whiskey. When you thought about it, silence was rarely silent. Silence was the small noises you heard when the larger noises disappeared. I sipped another swallow of whiskey. The whiskey added a little charge to the silence. Irish whiskey was, in fact, excellent for thinking about things like silence. A car came slowly down Berkeley Street and parked up on the curb below my office window by a sign that said, "Tow zone, no parking anytime." A bulky man with a large red nose got out. I knew who he was. So, yeah, why'd I read that? Well, there's never been a Spenser story yet where he starts off with him at the window looking out and drinking. And basically, like I said, he's listless and unhappy. So, okay, so he meets Meade Alexander and his wife, Ronnie. This is their first interview together. Are you a religious man, Mr. Spenser? No. Were you raised in a Christian faith? My people are Irish. I was raised Catholic. But you no longer believe? Nope. Do you believe in an almighty God? Why? Does he want to hire me? So there's Spenser being irreverent as usual, but it's interesting. He never really becomes rude with Meade Alexander. There's a certain amount of respect that he shows to him, and I think that's a really nice touch here. The wife, Ronnie Alexander, says, "Are you married, Mr. Spenser?" Her smile when she asked me was very bright. "No, ma'am." "Ever?" "No, ma'am." She kept smiling and nodded as if she had confirmed a suspicion. If I'd been married, I'd have had better manners. "Do you want me to demonstrate anything?" I said to Alexander. "Shoot the wings off a fly? Wrestle a bear? I'm really very skillful for an unmarried agnostic." So, he's being his usual funny or not so funny self. Just can't help himself. Let me choose a few more. Okay. I think his conversation with Meade Alexander is really well done and very powerful. Meade Alexander and Spenser are talking in a restaurant, and he says he needs to talk to him about something very important and very private. He goes, "It's Mrs. Alexander." I nodded. "She has, I'm afraid, been indiscreet." I nodded some more. They have. His voice started to clog, and tears began to form in his eyes. He looked down again and breathed in several times, letting the breath out sharply, almost like a sprinter trying to blow a little extra into his kick. Then he looked up again with his eyes wet and said quite steadily, "There are pictures." "Oh shit," I said. "I'm sorry." He began to rock slightly in his chair, his hands still on the tabletop. "Videotape," he said. His voice was choked again. "Color." He stood up suddenly and walked away from the table toward the men's room. I sat and stared at the food. I didn't feel so much like eating anymore either. And they go for a walk and they talk about the situation a bit more. Spenser wants to get some more details and really wants to feel Meade Alexander out on the situation. He says, "It was mailed to my home," Alexander said, "in Fitchburg, a videotape. No return address, Boston postmark." The film showed Ronnie having sex with a young man in what appeared to be an apartment. It was apparent that she didn't know of the taping. And he explains more as they walk along. And Spenser asks, "Have you discussed this with her?" I said. "No. She doesn't know. She's not to know. Ever. It would break her heart if she knew." "I can't be delicate about this," I said. The whole thing is indelicate. There's no way around it. I have to ask questions. Yes, he said. Go ahead. You're persuaded that this is not a porno film, that is something she posed for? I'm sure that it is not deliberately posed. People don't just stroll around with videotape cameras, I said. Someone set this up. Alexander nodded. The room had to have had enough light, I said. It was daylight mostly, Alexander said. One wall of the room was glass and it was bright daylight. The drapes were open. Is there a way to narrow this down? I said. Alexander said, I don't understand. I took a deep breath. Can we try to track down her partner, or could it be any one of a number? Alexander stopped and squeezed his eyes shut, and then turned his head away from me and down, almost the way a dog will cower. He tried to say something and couldn't. He tried again and still couldn't. His hands were deep in his raincoat pockets. His shoulders were hunched and he rocked a little, as if a gentle wind were making him sway. Finally he said, I don't know, in a barely human voice. Can you ask her? I said. He shook his head. If it came down to it, I said, would you drop out of the race? Without looking up, he nodded again. And never tell her why? I said, nod. And throw your support to Brown. Brown is his opponent, the guy with the mob ties. Nod. I've heard Brown is mob connected. Nod. And you'd support him. Alexander's shoulders were beginning to shake. He raised his face. Tears were squeezing out of his squinted eyes and running down his face. Yes, he said. His voice shook, but there was an energy in it I had never heard before. He straightened a little and stopped swaying. The rain came harder, and the wind intensified. It was no longer a good rain to walk in, even under other circumstances. It had gotten cold, as if November had reasserted itself. We were alone on the street with the wind driving the rain before it. I would support Satan to spare her, Alexander said. I nodded. So would I said. Yeah, this is the Spenser that we love, and the Spenser that we're feeling for as he does his best in his work and struggles with this situation with Susan. Thanks a lot. See you next time. Take care.